Hello, hello. Today we are focusing on ethics and ethics in research and counseling research. And for those of you that are paying closer attention to the syllabus, you will notice that the syllabus says that this week we were looking at ethical and cultural considerations in counseling research, but I've dropped the cultural piece of it, not completely, so that will be coming later on in the semester. Probably one of the last 2 weeks where I don't think there's going to be as much content, and I think the cultural aspects could nicely fit in the future of rehab counseling research area. So, but I definitely wanted to fine-tune the focus on ethics and research and counseling research because it's an area that warrants a good discussion, I would say, and one that we just can't overlook, to the degree where if you have ideally looked at the ethical codes, the ACA Code of Ethics and the CRCC Code of Ethics, both of them have complete sections dedicated to ethical research practices in counseling. And there are a lot of different things that need to be taken into consideration when it comes to ethical research and in the counseling profession. And if you go through kind of the last couple of resource pages that I've got for you in this module, or review the history of research and how ethical practices were not always done in research, especially research on human subjects. So unfortunately, in the scientific field of research, there's not a really good track record historically for what we've done to human beings, how we've treated each other, essentially. And so because of the result of our, people coming to an agreement that no, it's not okay to just give some people a treatment for syphilis and other people not, and just see what happens. Or no, it's really not okay to separate identical twins in the adoption system and then not tell them that they have a twin out there, just to see the nature versus nurture play out in real life. Like, those things are not okay. And so as a result of the society collectively coming to an agreement that that was not okay, we have things like the IRB process that have come into place, and we have ethical codes and standards of research practices that we now follow in order to protect people. And that's the main, one of the main, but I would say the top focus of ethical research practices, especially in terms of counseling. Because if you, or as you've noticed, as you've looked at research articles that are mental health counseling focused and rehab counseling focused for your research analysis assignment, by and large, the research that's being conducted in the field of counseling is conducted with people. And so we're often measuring the effectiveness of services we're providing, and measurements come from our clients, or we're looking at the impact of certain techniques that we're using or interventions that we're doing, and the impact comes from the results of the people. So it's incredibly important that we protect our human subjects, right, in counseling research. And we do that by receiving training, for one, and that comes through courses like this one. Your ethics course will, I'm quite certain, focus on research to a degree. So you'll continuously hear about how we have to adhere to ethical standards when we're conducting research and counseling. And so, that's part of it. This is the knowledge area of your competence. The other is adhering to policies and practices that have been set forth by federal agencies, by governments, by university settings. A lot of that is really shown through the institutional review process, the IRB process. And I put some information about that and linking to WVU's office, where you can find information about the IRB process as well. So that's basically your kind of go-to, I would say, if you want to learn about the forms that you might have to complete. Let's say if you are a student and you're wanting to conduct some research, because you're a student of WVU, you would go through WVU's IRB process. So there are these policies, procedures set into place. Going through IRB is one of them. There's additional training called city training. I had to do it a couple of times because it expires after a while, as part of my process to get my dissertation work completed, because that was something that Duquesne required as well. That before I did any research, I had to do city training, which was just basically ethics and research training, getting familiar with the laws and the standards that are out there. Also within ethical research practices is providing informed consent. And so this is different than the informed consent that we would use for counseling practice. An informed consent is reflecting the ability of a participant in a research study to drop out, basically, at their will. It's their choice to participate. It's their choice to stop participating whenever they want to. And we, as researchers, cannot force somebody to continue to participate in our research study just because we would hope that it would benefit the results of our study. And so we're providing informed consent across the board. We're also allowing participants to have access to the final results of the study. And so by that, I mean, whenever we would go, let's say I conducted a study, surveyed participants, or did a focus group or something like that, I would then collect all the data, analyze it, publish it. Years later, it would actually be published in a journal because that's how long it takes. But the public doesn't have access to peer-reviewed research journals. And so unless I, as the author of the publication, set my or agreed with the publisher that it would be public domain information, that it could be passed, you could find it through a Google search essentially, then participants might not ever have the results of the study. They might not know. But as part of my ethical responsibility as a researcher in that informed consent and disclosure information, I'm providing them with my contact information so that at the end of it all, if they want to contact me and find out, hey, what were the results of that study that I participated in, I am then obligated to share with them the results. And that's part of what they're able to do as a participant of a study. There's also confidentiality requirements that come along with ethical practices in research and counseling. And so similar to a degree to, keeping our clients' information confidential. Whenever I went through the IRB process for my dissertation, that was one area I can remember that they wanted more information on. So within the additional supplemental reading that I provided for you, the rehabilitation counseling research chapter 4, the part of chapter 4, the end part of chapter 4 of the Rumrow book, provides information about the IRB process in there and about confidentiality and disclosure agreements. But so if you're looking at the IRB form, what happens is that you're basically putting a picture down for a board of individuals at a university or institution that have been assigned to look over the research to make sure it all makes sense, to make sure that you have considered any kind of risks to your participants, that you've addressed them appropriately. And a big part of that is confidentiality of information. And so I vividly remember getting kicked back to me, which wasn't overall denial. It was just hey, you need to revise this and tell us more, because I was using an online survey, and with that, some information they felt could have been tied to the participants that they wanted to make sure I didn't have that, because part of my research design was to say that I wouldn't know who the people were at all. I would never have names. I would have no contact information for my participants. And so my IRB at Duquesne wanted to make sure that the survey instrument that I was using, like SurveyMonkey or Qualtrics, for example, that they weren't keeping some information stored in their system that I technically could have access to, which wasn't the case. And I just had to dig on their website and figure out, how to word things appropriately. But when you're conducting research and you're going through the IRB process to get research approved, if you're doing research on human subjects, oftentimes it'll get bounced back to you for clarification purposes. Also, you have to provide IRBs with all the forms that you might have. And so if you've ever been solicited to be a participant in a research study, usually you'll get the information, you'll figure out who the researchers are, why they're conducting the study itself, why it's important to the field, any incentives that they might have, like, hey, if you participate, we're going to randomly select one person to get a $50 Amazon gift card. And so that's an incentive. So all of that information has to be disclosed at the forefront of the study. So there's so much that actually takes place even before somebody conducts any bit of the research itself, right? There's so much work on the back end of doing counseling research that we don't always know about, and it's all rooted in ethical practice. It's because we have to maintain ethical standards, because at the end of the day, informing our participants about what this study entails, about potential risks, ensuring that we're not doing any kind of harm or putting people in danger in the process of conducting research, all of that goes back to those ethical principles that we have to adhere to. And so for me, it's interesting that we don't talk about ethics as much as we probably should, I guess. I don't know, but I love ethics myself. And so that's the main takeaway, I would say, that research in and of itself, the process of doing research, every bit of it is tied back to our codes of ethics and our need to be protecting our research subjects, people, human subjects. So with that, I'll leave you guys to look over all the information that I provided out there, and I hope you find it equally interesting. And all you have this week is the research analysis. Quick reminder here that if you did your research analysis, the article analysis on a mental health research article first, this time it's got to be rehab counseling. If you did rehab counseling last time, this time it's got to be mental health. So that's my disclaimer. Please try to remember, because I don't off the top of my head remember what everybody did, and so I hate to go back through and look. But so try to make sure that you're picking out appropriate articles in the right subject area. If you have questions about that, if you're having trouble finding them, please let me know. And great job on everybody's logic models, and I like where the ideas are going for the program, the counseling program evaluation. And I do apologize, because now we're just putting the researcher hat back on these next couple of weeks before we get back into the program evaluation piece. So we are kind of bouncing back and forth here for a little bit. So that's my spiel on kind of what's coming up for you guys this week. So with that, I'll let you go, and I'll check back in with you all on discussion boards and through email.